confused by that. Like, what is that? Why are we doing that?
I wish that was rhetorical, but, and I do believe in many instances it is ideological excess, driven to madness. But, well, give an example from just a few months ago. I believe it was this August, this year, there was a prime minister in Bangladesh who was basically ousted in a sort of military coup coupled with a color revolution, and Gray Zone News, Max Blumenthal's outlet, published this report that I've been talking about a lot for the past week because it's just a really, really clean example of all of the different facets of the dynamics I'm talking about, which is, so basically starting in about 2018 through 2020, it appeared that U.S. statecraft was not particularly pleased with Sheikh Hasina winning this, the prime minister winning the election, and baseline assessments were submitted to the State Department about how to prop up the opposition group, the Bangladeshi National Party, the BNP, which was considered more favorable to U.S. interests. The leaked documents don't get too in the nitty gritty about what U.S. national interest is served. But there were many conflicts between that Bangladeshi prime minister and, the U.S. foreign policy establishment. For example, it was revealed in WikiLeaks that Hillary Clinton, while she was Secretary of State, threatened to have the IRS do an audit of her son while she lived in the U.S. And that prime minister has come out publicly and said that, she believed that she was overthrown, because of, or basically there was a conflict around the construction of a U.S. military base in the region, which is a very common conflict that we have. Oftentimes foreign countries don't like having a big fat U.S. military base installed, on.
They don't want foreign troops on their soil. Who does?
Right. They don't want 500 acres of their land. They don't want to provoke, foreign powers. This is what's playing out in Romania with George Askew and the cancellation of the elections, and
it's just like a giant NATO base right now.
Right. Well, they're building the Europe's largest NATO base, currently, which, faces straight out at the Black Sea at Crimea. But there was this, but she had been refusing to build a U.S. military base. So let's just, but as I walk through this, let me just make some assumptions and make it a harder issue than, or something a little bit more, I guess, accessible. Let's just say it really is vital to U.S. national interests to build that military base in Bangladesh to counter Chinese influence, and the Bangladeshi prime minister doesn't want to do it. And so our foreign policy planners decide we need to do regime change. And whether or not you agree that's a good or an evil thing to do, I'm not even weighing into the morality of it. What if it is the declared or discrete policy of the U.S. government, the State Department and the White House and the National Security Council all agree this government, we should pursue regime change, all options to destabilize that country in order to weaken the existing government and to build up our network of democratic institutions and activists, in order to either win the next election or in order to, do a color revolution style, ousting where the prime minister has to flee in a helicopter. And what was done in this case in Bangladesh, and these leaked documents from the Gray Zone show this in gratuitous detail, is that, the National Endowment for Democracy's Republican arm, the International Republican Institute, they have 4 core forces, but 2 of them are political branches. There's the NDI, the National Democratic Institute for Democrats, and there's the IRI, the International Republican Institute for Republicans. And what the IRI submitted to the State Department in 2019, 2020, after they got walloped trying to back the Bangladeshi National Party, in the recent past election, was a plan to destabilize Bangladesh politics. That's a direct quote, destabilize Bangladesh politics. By working with, they listed 170, pro-democracy activists, 304 key informants, and then they did a baseline assessment of the different, ethnic groups and cultural cleavage points that they could exploit in order to effectively, either destabilize the country's politics or prop up the political alternative. And in the process of doing that, they sought the LGBT population, two Bangladeshi ethnic minority groups, and young students and student groups who had already been protesting earlier that year because of some local politics issue there, and they noted that rap music was popular and young people were listening to rap music in Bangladesh. So what do? They turned around and they took U.S. taxpayer funds. They get 100% of their money from the State Department, and they work closely with USAID. They actually administer USAID programs all over Bangladesh and all over the world. And they funded Bangladeshi rap groups to produce songs and music videos insinuating that people should take to the streets and do street protests, and the classic peaceful protest that's has the upside of being a riot. In IRI's baseline assessment submitted to the State Department, they talked about how one of the songs that they paid for was designed to sow resentment at the sitting government and basically undermine the popularity of the government. So you have one sponsored song to get people to take the streets, another sponsored rap song to get people to distrust their government, and then basically the baseline assessment revealed that these groups were the ones who would be receptive. Those were the contacts in the region. They do field work when they do these baseline assessments. What if the baseline assessment, or the strategic assessment, happens to reveal that the highest ROI for soft power projection is with very unseemly groups and activities? This is, for example, how we end up funding terrorist groups and paramilitaries, and very extreme, because oftentimes when you have a popular government, it's the coalition of the fringes and the extremes and the weirdos and the criminals and the prostitutes. This was in an NED memo in 2009 for Cuba, where the National Endowment for Democracy, they have something called the Journal of Democracy, and they talked about this exact phenomenon, that they might be able to mobilize the Afro-Cuban community to leveraging racial animus against the mostly white Cuban government, and taking note of proclivities for, I think it was prostitution, crime, and drugs, and how USAID might be able to swoop in and mobilize these people because a lot of them are really unemployed. And also USAID should fund the rap groups there because these populations all listen to rap, and they did. And this is another great gray zone.
You're making the hair on my arms go up because you're describing what's happened in our country.
Yes.
You're describing the 2017 Charlottesville march, the Nazi march. You're describing what happened on January 6th. You're describing the riots after George Floyd was murdered. You're describing the rise of rap music and drugs in our city, and all of it. You're describing, tranny story hour, and, you're describing all the trends in our country that seem to arise out of nowhere, whose net effect is to destabilize America, to fray the social fabric, to divide people from each other, to make them easier to control, and in the case of Trump's first term, to undermine the White House. Right? I mean, I don't know that any of that's true, but what you're describing that we did in Bangladesh is what's happened here. And so it raises the question, was that all by design also? And of course it was, right?
Well, there's a lot there. USAID gave
am I crazy to ask that?
No, not at all. I mean, that is, to me, the final blow. It's bad, and there's the moral question about whether to do this sort of dirty work abroad. And that comes down to different schools of foreign policy thought and to different views on the relative morality of different ways of attacking the issue of U.S. soft power influence abroad.